Welcome to Design Foundations, the podcast where faith, family health, and true wellness come together. I'm Kelly, an integrative health practitioner, optometrist, and mom who's been where you are. I know how overwhelming it can feel to navigate health challenges for yourself and your family. That's why I'm here, to help you uncover the root causes of those struggles and help you build an unshakable foundation for a thriving life where you feel rooted, replenished, and restored. In each episode, we'll cut through the noise, talk about practical tips, and share real-life stories to encourage and equip you. You've got what it takes to create lasting wellness. I'm just here to help you get there. Let's dive in. Welcome to another week of Design Foundations. My name is Kelly Meehan. I am your host. Today we have again joining us my best friend of all time, Natalie Black. She was here I'm not sure when these are going to go, what the flow is, but we recorded an episode on rest prior to this. So she is back. Thank you so much for being here. Again, we have another topic that we've hashed out to death, and that is just living with chronic disease. And so this is something I just wanted to bring to my audience. It's so common nowadays. And you actually were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as a kiddo. So we've got a good perspective, both as a child, as an adult, and then we'll just kind of launch into it. But I know there's a lot of value and just there's so much in sharing each other's experiences, especially in walking with a chronic condition.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump straight into some of the story. We've already kind of introduced you on a last episode. So just tell us a little bit about your diagnosis story, when you were diagnosed, what that looked like.
Yes, I was diagnosed when I was 9 years old. I was almost 10. And we had just moved. My family had just moved. And it was about a month later that I started seeing some symptoms. Of course, at the time, didn't know they were symptoms. It was all things that we could excuse away, right? So the top 3 symptoms of a type 1 diagnosis is going to be weight loss, unexplained, and extreme thirst, and then frequent urination. And so we started seeing those things, but everything was explainable. I had joined a basketball team at the YMCA, and maybe it's a growth spurt, so I'm dropping a few pounds. Okay. Or, we just moved back to the desert. We moved back to Arizona. So of course you're more thirsty, and you're playing sports. So you're more thirsty. You're more thirsty. So of course you're going to the bathroom more. So it was a couple of weeks of that. But things then started to get extreme. I lost, I think, a total of 14 pounds, which on a 9-year-old is a lot. It's definitely more than 5% of your body weight. Significant. To the point where my buttoned jeans could just be pulled down and dropped to the floor. And again, we would joke about it. My mom would tease me or something, but it's starting to be alarming. And waking up in the night to go to the bathroom, running to the bathroom 7 times a night, 9 times a night, then wetting the bed as a 9-year-old. So things that we could know more to say, maybe it's this.
Yeah, something seems a little off here.
Yeah. So because we just moved back, and again, some of this is from my memory and then retelling over the years, and I was a child, but from what I remember, we had upcoming appointments at our pediatrician to establish care, in the new city that we were in. And I actually realized in my mind, we just were going to those appointments. But my mom said later that she had either seen something on the news or read an article about juvenile diabetes and seen the symptoms and called and moved up the appointments a few weeks. And it was starting to affect my mood also, and just very grumpy, lethargic, those kind of things. So she called and moved up the appointments. We drove down there as a family. Of course, I was thirsty, finished a water bottle in the car. Of course, I had to pee right when I got there. So they did a urine sample. And then we get back into the doctor's office. And by the time the pediatrician came in and introduced herself, she said, we already run the results, urine analysis, and I called the hospital and we have a bed waiting for you at Phoenix Children's. And the air kind of went out of the room.
Yeah, no fear there.
My parents heard the word hospital, looked at my parents' faces, and they looked like a deer in the headlights, but, forced calm voices. And my mom just said, okay, we'll go home and pack a bag. And the doctor, in her calm voice, but assertive, said, no, you won't. You'll go straight to her right now. It's waiting for you. So we went to the hospital and obviously started all kinds of blood work. And we had a diagnosis within like 24 hours. Initial blood sugar was off the charts, whatever. I don't know how high up the charts go, but the first reading they got that was on the charts was in 700.
Oh, wow.
Normal for a non-diabetic is 60 to 120.
Yeah.
Hopefully like this. So
I'm surprised that you were even honestly like coherent.
Yeah, they said within, if we probably would have waited another day, I probably would have been in a coma, which is just really wild to think about because up until then, I'm still feeling like a normal, healthy kid. I mean, obviously, I wasn't feeling great, but otherwise. So thankfully, we avoided that kind of an emergency situation, but I was hospitalized for several days. Things were under control, blood sugars within 24 to 48 hours once they realized what was going on, but stayed for a couple of days for just diabetes education. Nutrition's coming in, teaching us how to count carbs, and a diabetes educator teaching us how to give shots, all those kind of things. And then we went home.
Okay, so I hate to even like wrap that up like in a bow because there's so much in there.
Yeah.
And then there had to be so much outside of the educating in like the hospital, but I mean, hands-on learning, right? I imagine
Absolutely. Yeah.
you got like a pump or were you giving shots?
We were shots initially for about 2.5 years. And then I did switch to an insulin pump. At the time, we kind of had to fight for. The pumps were newer and seen, at least by my pediatric endocrinologist at the time. I think there was a fear there that you just go on a pump and you think it'll solve all your problems. So there was a real, we kind of had to fight for that at the time. I think it's definitely changed and the technology has been much more improved and accepted and all of that. But did about 2.5 years of shots. So very regimented, scheduled. You're taking a mixture of both short acting, fast acting and slower acting insulin, and you're eating this amount of carb at this times of the day. And it was all very set, and then went through the education and switched over to the pump.
Okay, so this is huge. There's so much mental load there for a kiddo or both. I can see it from a parent's perspective and almost the fear of not getting that right. Because if you don't keep your blood sugar normalized, it's significant what can happen. I don't even know if a child really realizes.
Surely not. I did not have a full awareness of that. And obviously my parents and my mom specifically, just my dad traveled and stuff. So my mom was the most hands-on and definitely bore the brunt of that stress and the knowledge of everything that we needed to do. Now that I'm a mom, I have a lot more compassion and patience for my mom. It was irritating as a kid, all the questions and the concern around it. But now I can't imagine what it would be like to have to manage that.
Right.
Your child.
And thankfully you don't. None of your kids at this point, right, are a type 1. So we actually connected on this topic a little bit. I'm not a type 1 diabetic, but I am celiac, which the thing that we were connecting on, or like kind of the interesting point, is the constant thought, right, of what's going in your mouth, but also you can never stop thinking about it.
24/7.
And I almost feel like comparing them, if I'm honest, because yours, or I should say like type 1 is more significant as far as like the immediate ramifications that can happen. But nonetheless, the constant thought of like just having to manage it, think about it, you can never go on autopilot.
Right.
Yeah. I would love for you to share like a little bit about that. And kind of what that's like, what you've experienced with that.
Yeah. My personality is very just you achieve, you do, you felt up by the bootstraps. So honestly, it's not even something that I allow myself to dwell on or acknowledge very often. And I think that can come and bite me because then like obviously there is a weight to that. When something is 24/7, you can never take a break. Basically, everything you do or don't do affects what your blood sugar is. And sometimes things beyond your control, many things beyond your control. So the level of constant that it is a burden for sure. And then especially it's not helpful that I try and keep that at arm's length or shove it deep down and really don't acknowledge that. And so most of the time I just kind of plow forward and I do what needs to be done. I do it very independently. It's something really, being a type 1 diabetic, having a chronic illness is something that I've almost like held at arm's length or avoided attaching to my identity in any significant way. I never wanted to go to any of the camps or the walks or anything like that. It can be a unique connection when you meet somebody else, maybe that's type 1, but then there's not much beyond that. It's kind of an odd thing to connect. I don't know. I was in a car crash too. It's like, well, then what are you saying next? It's like very odd. There can be some level of connection there, but I really withheld it from my identity. But the truth is, it is 24/7. Everything, not only that you eat, but exercise, illness, hormonal changes, stress levels, inactivity or activity, just all kinds of things. It's a constant thought and weight.
I love that you brought up identity. And this is so huge. It has been huge in my life and for many of the clients that I work with, right? It's so easy to get attached to some type of identity, some type of diagnosis, whether it be chronic, whether it be autoimmune. And we are kind of two different sides of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like you have said, like I kind of held it at arm's length,
which I don't healthy.
Yeah, no, like they both, neither are healthy, and that's kind of the point. But we exhibit it a different way. As for myself, and when my child was diagnosed with celiac, for like years, it was all encompassing, right? And okay, there's good to wanting what's best and trying to figure things out and connecting the dots, but when your identity starts to get attached there, right, it's unhealthy on its own negative spiral. And so interesting, like two different sides of the spectrum. And of course, there's a healthy balance in the middle. So how would you say your faith has affected or changed how you handle the mental load, the physical burden, what that looks like? Just, I don't know, I can even rephrase that if necessary.
No, I think it's a good question. If you would have asked me this even a couple months ago, I don't know what I would have said. This has been an area that the Lord really just pressed on even a couple of weeks ago, which is so funny. Like I said, I'm independent, capable. That's how I identified myself and what I prided myself on, and in an unhealthy way. And the Lord has done a lot in my life to dismantle that and to realize that I can boast in my weakness because in my weakness, He is strong, which was an insane thing for me to read in scripture. I was like, boast in my weakness. I mean, I would do everything I can to console my weakness. Okay. That was how I lived my life. And like I said, the Lord has graciously done a lot to dismantle that over the years. And just a few weeks ago, I was having a really difficult couple of days. And obviously I was talking to you about it at the time. I did not feel well. My blood sugar was out of control and wasn't sure why. And it was just one of those times where it's just staring you in the face, no matter what you do or don't do. Sometimes you can't perfectly control your blood sugar. And it's really frustrating, especially as someone who has had well-controlled blood sugars. Overall, I've had 3 healthy pregnancies. Like you would look at my blood work and say, you've never been hospitalized. You've been in good control, all these things. And I make healthy choices and healthy foundations regularly to support that. But sometimes there are going to be things that happen. They're outside of your control. And so not only was that frustrating those couple of days for me mentally, emotionally, then it was all of the second guessing. Well, is it some kind of pump failure? Is it something that I did, something that I consumed or didn't consume, something that I'm responsible for? And the weight of that guilt, the weight of that constant responsibility, I just was so discouraged, so frustrated. And I couldn't separate it from my identity at that point. I had to acknowledge this is my life. This is a reality of my life. This is not something that I can control. This is not something that I can be great at all the time. This is outside of my control. And I have to accept it. And even the difficulty of it, like even the suffering of it, which it's hard for me to say. And it's a miracle that you even have me here talking about this. That's to say how far I come, but like, I didn't even tell people I have a type 1 diabetic.
I didn't know for a long time.
I meet people. My mom would be like, did you tell your boss? Did you tell people at college? Like, I don't talk about it. I keep it all very discreet. So the fact that I'm on a podcast is just wild. I've come a long way. But this was an area a few weeks ago that the Lord was just like, we're going to deal with this now. Like, this is suffering.
Mm-hmm. It's such a beautiful story. And it reminds me a lot of like, this is like your thorn. Or like one of your thorns.
What I thought of. Yeah. And just like I can pray and I can ask the Lord for wisdom and an ability to manage this and to be diligent, but He's not going to take it away. This isn't going anywhere. I have to acknowledge that it has real implications in my life. I like to focus on all of the wins, all the ways that I'm just like everybody else. I'm still normal. It's kind of what I always say when people are surprised or they learn it about me. They say, oh, wow, I had no idea. How does that affect your life? And I say, I'm healthy. I'm normal. I've had 3 healthy pregnancies. Like I go straight to the positive. And all those things are positive, but there's a lot of negative. Yeah, there's a lot of struggle and a lot of suffering. And that I'm also a very private person, guarded, which again, it's a miracle that I'm here. You've tricked me into talking about this. But the Lord was not only showing me like, yeah, this is a suffering you have to acknowledge, a thorn in your side, something that you're going to have to rely on me for. I also forced myself to talk about that I was struggling, which was so hard. Again, I'm very private emotionally and stuff. And I forced myself to go into my husband's office and tell him like, I'm really struggling. I'm really frustrated and so difficult to cry. I never want to be seen as the victim. Like I hate the extra attention from people. That's all the reasons why I like to not make a big deal about it. And I told you and another close friend, like, yeah, I'm really struggling with this right now. So for me, it's the Lord is growing me in this area and is saying, surrender this to me. Trust me with this. I'm going to use this. Yep. Sanctify you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And in sharing with those around you, like they're able, not necessarily to help carry the burden, maybe of the condition itself, but to be able to walk alongside you, right? Bring you encouragement. Thank you for sharing. I know how hard this is for you to share all of that, but it makes me think, like you said, I like to focus on the positive, and I think that's great. And we all do. I like to focus on the positive as well, but there is a negative side. And I was just talking about this with one of my girls, my girls have celiac too. And they were just, it's hard. You're set apart. It's obvious that you're doing something different. A lot of times you can't partake in what other people are doing. I know in some ways this can be similar. And she was just like, this stinks. Like I ate this. Yeah. And so often as a mom, like if you're listening and you have a mom that has a chronic condition, it's so easy to be like, you want to just go into the positive right away because you want to like reframe like, well, God gave you this and there's a reason for it. And that's all true. But I also think there is a place, and it's okay to say, yeah, it does stink. Yeah. You know what? It stinks. Yeah. Like, I hear you. I see you. This is hard. It stinks. But, right, God uses these things to help shape us and grow us and walk alongside us. So I just love to bring up there's a space for both.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's important that we do acknowledge both, because otherwise we're just shoving the feelings, right, like to the side.
Which is what I'm a pro at. Right. And this, aren't we off like, a breakdown or a meltdown, whatever, an emotional response. I would say I've had less than like a handful, and I've been diabetic for 26 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, too much holding it at arm's length, not acknowledging the difficulty. And not that I want to live in the difficulty, but if I'm not acknowledging my weakness in this area, the thorn in my side, then I'm not relying on what the Lord is trying to do in my life through it. Or I just want to do it in my own strength and say, look how capable I am at managing this. That's the only thing I want to present to the world and really to myself, because that feels comfortable to me. But when I face the reality, I want to say, I didn't want this. I didn't want this to be a part of my life and my story and my identity. And what I've done, instead of surrendering to the Lord and his plan for me by really accepting this, is I tried to say, I don't want this to be a part of my story. So the little bit that I'm going to take is only what I can control and say, this is good. The rest of it, I want to detach myself from, the part that makes me feel weak or like this is a suffering. And so it's really resisting God's good plan for my life.
Mm-hmm. And such a picture of that you can have wellness and have a chronic condition, right?
Yeah.
If you would just you kind of just did, but I think because so many people are in this state, and I said often we attach like being well to perfect physical health, perfect fitness, like the body that looks good. But we can have wellness and still have, right, a chronic condition. Yeah. We can still have that like spiritual rest, dependence on the Lord, know that he's in control, and be experiencing a difficult circumstance. And this is true. So many of my clients, I've experienced this. I know you have walked this. With that said, what are some kind of switching gears a little, like some of the physical foundations that you would say have made the biggest change in your lifestyle and supporting you with this?
Yeah, I mean, the basic foundation for everyone.
Thank you.
You do the ZEPLA, same things that you're telling most of your clients. I don't want to bore people, but regular exercise, obviously, like from walking to strength training, like anything that helps anyone else balance their blood sugar is going to help mine to the extent that I can within my control, which acknowledging that some of it is out of my control is a huge piece of it too. But I am such a stickler about like protein with every meal. I wasn't always like this, by the way. And I had I have had overall good health, but like the teenage years were rough and college was just kind of iffy. I wasn't always as dialed in as I am now, but truly like the foundations, I'm checking my blood sugar a lot and I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do, like taking insulin, all those basic things, but balancing meals with like protein always, but like protein, fat, carbs, fiber, like water. I mean, recognizing that things like caffeine can affect my whole like nervous system. So, I mean, from highs and lows, like all of those things, just being more aware of how things personally affect my body.
Yeah.
Sticking to that.
It's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking these are the actionable steps.
Yeah.
Right? And some of them, you're right. Like I've laid them out. I've talked to clients about, but you have like an immediate feedback mechanism that most people don't actually have. So it's like, right away, if you skipped one of those foundations or one of those are missing, or you have to start thinking about if you know, like your blood sugar is high, what was off, right? Was it stress? Was it hormones? Was it the coffee that I drank this morning?
Yes.
And that's just like an interesting feedback in some way. In some way, people, of course, I'm not in any way saying that somebody would like want type 1 diabetes, but it's interesting the immediate feedback.
You're forced to acknowledge the reality of how the things that you're doing or not doing are affecting your body.
Yeah, so you have a very unique perspective in looking at that. How would you say that you found ways to manage stress that help keep some of your symptoms under control? I think a lot of us, we talk about stress, we talk about managing the nervous system. And like I said, you have that feedback mechanism to know, like when I'm stressed out, my blood sugar rises. And I think that's one of those things that we hear said, like, oh yeah, I know that, but we like think it doesn't apply to us, or that it's not rocking my foundation and cortisol levels are spiking. So what are some ways that you have found to manage that?
Yeah, to manage my like sticking to the foundation.
Yeah, or I should say, how are you seeing stress affect your like physical health, even like in relation to like your blood sugar?
Yeah,
for now.
Yeah, and I even had like a lot of lows from stress too. So it can go like either way, depending on what's happening. But yeah, stress. And I think all the foundations like reinforce each other. I mean, you would probably say, yes, they do. But things like exercise and stuff not only has benefits to, and like building your muscle mass, which helps you process carbohydrates better and all these things and balance your blood sugar. But for me, like walking every morning is like, that's huge for my overall stress. Now, at this point, when I get up first thing and go on a walk, it's more for my overall like stress and nervous system because I'm just really sensitive to getting whipped up like that than it is for the exercise benefits that someone else, like the physical benefits. But I know it does affect me physically, but it's not like I'm walking for weight loss as much as I'm walking to manage my stress. Yeah. And things like sleep and caffeine and just making minor adjustments. And it's not like I don't indulge. I absolutely do. I'm not fearful of things, but learning how things affect you and then taking that seriously and making the decisions that you need to be healthy.
Okay. We're going to wrap this up today, mostly because we have to go pick up our kids from school. This is an afternoon. But what would you say, just like kind of a couple closing questions.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone listening who has a friend who is a type 1 diabetic or has a child perhaps, or even just any chronic condition, like in walking with them and supporting them in that?
That's a great question. I think if they have a child, I don't know, and I don't have a child with a chronic condition, but like I said earlier, I do have a lot more compassion for my mom, where before I just was bothered by her questions and, her oversight. But it's very difficult to have, it would be difficult to have a child with a chronic condition. And I will say, one of the things that I learned, and I've seen you build in your kids, is learning to advocate for yourself. And you've already empowered your kids to learn to advocate for themselves and become comfortable with accepting your chronic condition. Like that's such a huge hurdle. As you guys heard me talk about, I accepted it, but kind of in this faux acceptance way. I think accepting it, because then you can move into being empowered and learning to advocate for yourself, because you have to. You have to get comfortable with, hey, I'm different. This is what I need and why, so that you feel good and all those things. And I've seen you build the confidence in your girls as a parent of someone with a chronic condition, you teaching them so that they can enjoy a full life to the extent that they're able and go do things and have sleepovers with friends or go on school trips. And my mom would have to come in and give her perspective on how to release the fear and stuff of all that. It's involved. I can only, now that I'm a mom, can only imagine how difficult that is. But I think as just a friend or maybe a spouse or something to someone, it's just nice to check in, like, and say, I know this is hard. Like, how are you doing? And when I forced myself to go tell my husband that I was struggling the other day, he was like, you don't have to do this alone. Like, you're so capable and independent, and that's great. But I'm here too, and don't carry this alone. And it's just reassuring.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. It is true about being an advocate. And, whether we're teaching our kids, whether teaching friends, other family members, I think that applies really in any spot. And it is okay to prioritize, take care of your health, get the foundations into your schedule. Those are non-negotiables, right? Well, what they are might wiggle around depending on how much time you have, but taking care of yourself in the foundations, both physically, spiritually, mentally, all have their place. We appreciate you being here, sharing your story. Thank you for being so vulnerable. Once again, if this episode resonated with you, please give us a follow, share it with someone that it would resonate with, especially if they have a kiddo with a chronic condition. If they are struggling with type 1 diabetes, we'd love for you to share this story. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to Design Foundations. I hope today's episode left you feeling encouraged and equipped to take meaningful steps towards building a healthier, more intentional life for you and your family. If you found value in this conversation, I'd love for you to share it with someone else who might need this encouragement today. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling inspired, leave a review. It helps this message reach more families like yours. Until next time, remember, true wellness starts with a strong foundation, rooted in faith, and grows with intentional care. Take care, and I'll see you next week.
This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. The information shared is not a substitute for professional medical care. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health or wellness routine.